Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a game from TC Freya, who's actually a guest on, I think, the most recent CC podcast that we did as of recording this, and he's also been on previously as well. He, of course, has also been streaming World of Warships for a fair old while, and I will put his Twitch link in the description below, just in case you somehow have never heard of him. He is playing the Kremlin, and I'll tell you now, this game is going to be a bit of a face roll. It's a bit of a ruffle stomp. I think a big part of how this game is going to end up being how it does end up being is due to the really poor positioning of the enemy team and just not providing any particularly stiff resistance. So we're starting off going to the middle, and of course the Kremlin, being a Russian battleship, has the feature that it is more accurate and more deadly the closer you are. It's able to be much more reliable with its guns, and we are certainly going to see some of that in this particular match. And although, to start with, I mean, it does look like the enemy team, they're contesting the middle, and they've actually just taken A, so it's not a bad start from them, but we can see they have almost nothing on the side of the C cap. They seem to have very heavily gone over to the A cap, and it means that the contesting enemy ships that have just captured B are really quite exposed on that side of the island that they're on the eastern side, because they now have a bunch of ships coming round from their east, and at the best they can try and run through the middle, and if they do that, they're going to run into not only, of course, TC's Kremlin guns, but also this Smolensk destroyer and was that an Edinburgh as well. So things with torpedoes basically, and things with guns that are going to be very nasty at short ranges. So yeah, the enemy team is just absolutely made a more or less beeline for the C cap, but the thing is, having taken the C cap, they are now steadily losing it. And so, even though that's where most of the enemy team is, they're not even going to be able to keep control of that cap. Now the first kill does actually go to the enemy team, but yeah, that's not going to last. TC's had a bit of a, it's not been able to shoot at much from here, just to start with, but the pace is going to start picking up relatively soon. It's not until he'll start pushing actively through the middle that he'll start to rack up the more impressive damage numbers. But for now, well, we have our first customer. There's Prince Eugen coming into view at very close range, and it's a solid 12k, but a lot of those overpenned, so unfortunately no insta-blap there. Somebody else does get the kill. 12k is still pretty nice though. It's still a pretty reasonable hit. Sadly, the Bismarck doesn't look like they want to come around the corner and play, but that's fine. They're just going to get hammered by all of those allied ships coming from the east. Meanwhile, there's absolutely no movement from the enemy team. At the A cap, they absolutely have the overwhelming numbers there, but they seem content just to let the other team have it. And so we're now going to end up with quite a few enemy ships just sort of twiddling their thumbs up there, not really doing much of anything very useful, and providing lots of nice broadside targets to shoot at for TC. Now, it does appear that the enemy submarine seems to have snuck up the, say, the 4 line, and has actually gone around the island, has pinged TC, but of course that then exactly gives away where you are, especially when you do that double ping. You don't just know where that you've been pinged, but you actually know the direction you've been pinged from on that second ping, and that has given the Edinburgh something to go and do. I think they're now going to hunt for them. TC's just gone forwards. There's no reason not to, really. There is an enemy destroyer reasonably close by, but yeah, the kid doesn't have a huge amount of torpedo power going for it, and he's got multiple allies here as well, so the kid isn't actually that big of a threat, potentially. So really, TC just has a bit of a shooting gallery at this point. So that broadside North Carolina looks like it'll do quite nicely, so let's take a pop at them. They're starting to finally push into the ACAT, but yeah, it's a bit late. We're 7 minutes in and the enemy team has kind of effectively lost this game already. I mean, they're only a couple of ships behind in terms of kills, but given the positioning that they have, this is unrecoverable, I would say. TC's team would have to throw this really, really hard, and TC himself would have to get like detonated or something to take him out of the equation. But none of those things are going to happen, I'll tell you that now. Anyway, so there is his first deletion, and if you can get some more shots into the Amagi, that would be quite nice. It's hard to get those big Citadel hits into Amagis though. Amagis have actually got quite well protected citadels in the scheme of things, so along with the German battleships, I don't know if it's a turtleback in quite the same way with the Amagi, but yeah, with the German battleships they do have that reputation of being a bit more noob friendly, in that you can pull maneuvers in them that would get you spanked hard in French or American or British battleships. And the Amagi is kind of an odd one out on the Japanese line in that regard, because the rest of the Japanese battleships don't really tend to have that same feature. And of course the Citadel on the Yamato in particular is sort of notorious in terms of being able to hit even if you are somewhat angled, and angled in a way that would protect you in other battleships. That frontal cheek shot is yeah, it's quite nasty. If you are showing a bit too much broadside, if you are angled a bit wrong, then it can go very, very wrong very quickly. It's not like it's a landslide in terms of ships. The enemy team, like, they're actually about equal on ships at the moment, but look at this, they have finally retaken the ACAP. They're all bunched up there now, and it is an absolute shooting gallery. And TC is only just getting to the stage of maybe having to use one of his consumables. Anyway, there's a broadside Mogami, very squashy target, and boom, dead. Yeah. Yeah. Mogami isn't the most heavily armoured cruiser, but when you are broadside to a Kremlin at less than 12 kilometres, I mean, that's not entirely unexpected. Let's see if he can replicate it with this Salem. Doesn't seem to be particularly trying to angle. Again, just giving plenty of broadside and only just starting to turn, but nope. There's another dev strike. So yeah, that's a double dev strike at this point. It is incidentally possible to get a double strike and like 2 dev strikes at once, but I think it would be really hard to do with guns. You would need to do it with torpedoes, and it would have to be a really, really lucky torpedo spread with something that has really high torpedo damage. So it's theoretically possible, but yeah, I don't know why I brought that up. It's just kind of... I don't know. My brain moves in mysterious ways, is the only answer I can give there. So that sub playing with the Edinburgh hasn't really been an issue for TC at all. I might do a separate video on subs at some point. I know it's what we're going to be talking about on this week's CC podcast, because we've had them now in random games for a couple of weeks. I'm not impressed, I'll tell you that, but I'll save a more full analysis for a separate video. In this particular game, it doesn't seem to have made any real difference. I mean, their own sub was active in capping A, I think, but then got sunk, and the enemy team's sub hasn't really done anything. And so I think we can say this is one of those games where they really had a pretty minimal impact. It's always easier to do well in a sub on the winning team, I'll say that much, just because if your team is doing well, they give you a lot more space to work with as a submarine, because they're generally not fast enough to run away from the things that can hunt them down. Anyway, nice broadside Richelieu. See if we can get some more citadels maybe, but I think it's a good hit. He maybe aimed a little too far back there, I'm not sure. Well, that takes him up to nearly 170k. I'm sure there are plenty of Kremlin games out there with higher damage than this, but yeah, it was still a fairly fun romp. I mean, maybe not quite as spectacular as Atam's Hood romp, but even though this was an easier ride perhaps for TC Freya, he still ended up with a Kraken. He's actually managed to get that last kill with his secondary guns, and it's not like the Russian battleships are known for having good secondaries, so that was a bit lucky, that Kraken. But nonetheless, he got the Kraken, and he's almost got 170k damage. He's probably not going to get in range of that last ship, and no, there's the match. So yeah, the double dev strike, Confederates, secondary kill, and the Kraken. 169,000 damage done, and that was enough to be top of the team, but only 1800 XP at the top of the team, so it was a good result for the Kremlin, but you know, it was a tier 10 battleship and he did have some pretty good circumstances there, but some of his other teammates did alright there as well. It's just, this one was definitely the enemy team giving it away, and all TC and his team needed to do was at least be competent. That's all they needed to do, was just not throw it away, and that's exactly what they didn't do. So there we go. So that's about it for this replay, I think. There isn't really much more to say about it. It wasn't a tremendously complicated game or anything. It was just TC taking advantage and kicking a moderate amount of butt as the enemy team played badly and was in a pretty good ship to do it in the form of the Kremlin. Hopefully you enjoyed this replay, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.